Plant these 10 trees once, and you could be feeding your family for the next 100 years. It sounds impossible, but every single tree on this list is capable of producing food for 80 to 300 years from one planting. If you want to stop depending on rising grocery prices and start building a real, self-renewing food source in your own backyard, this video is for you. Plant them today, and you're not just gardening, you're laying down a food system your grandchildren will inherit. Before we get into the list, let's talk about why this matters right now. Grocery prices have climbed every single year for the last decade. Supply chains keep breaking down over things nobody can control, and most families have never once thought about where their food would come from if the shelves went empty for a week. That's the gap these 10 trees fill. None of them need a greenhouse. None of them need daily watering. Most of them practically ignore you once they're established, and every one of them can outlive you, your kids, and in some cases your great-grandchildren. Stick around to the end, because I'll also cover which of these trees pair well together, how to lay them out in even a small backyard, and the one mistake almost everyone makes when they plant their first fruit or nut tree. And don't skip tree number 6. It's the closest thing to a bread factory that nature has ever built. 1. Mulberry, the fruit the supermarket forgot. Mulberries almost never make it to a grocery shelf, and there's a simple reason why. They're too soft, too delicate, and too perishable to survive a truck ride across the country. That's bad news for supermarkets, but it's fantastic news for you, because it means this incredibly sweet, nutrient-packed fruit is basically reserved for people who grow their own. A single mature mulberry tree can produce 50 to 80 pounds of fruit every summer, and unlike most fruit trees, it doesn't make you wait. Many varieties fruit within just 3 to 5 years. Compare that to a decade for an apple tree, and you start to see why homesteaders call it the impatient gardener's tree. It also thrives on neglect. Poor soil, drought, zero pruning, none of it bothers a mulberry. It'll grow in compacted clay, sandy lots, even the strip of dirt along a fence line that nothing else survives in. Dried mulberries have sustained communities in Central Asia for generations, delivering close to 10% protein, which is remarkable for a fruit. Farmers there would dry entire harvests on rooftops, grind some into a coarse flour, and stretch it through the winter months when fresh produce disappeared. There's also a quieter benefit most people never mention: mulberry leaves. In parts of Asia, they're used to feed livestock, and even brewed into a mild tea. So beyond the fruit itself, you're getting a tree that can support animals on a small homestead too. Plant one, and you've got a low-effort food source that can keep producing for 50 years or more. 2. Hazelnut, the pantry tree that never spoils. Most fruit gives you sugar and water. Hazelnuts give you something far more valuable when things get tight: dense, storable calories. 1 pound of hazelnuts contains roughly 2,800 calories, so a single mature tree producing 30 pounds a year is quietly generating over 80,000 calories without you lifting a finger. Hazelnuts adapt to a wide range of soils and climates, and they're early producers too, often bearing nuts within 3 to 4 years. They also stay small compared to most nut trees, usually topping out around 10 to 15 feet, which makes them perfect for a backyard hedgerow instead of a single towering tree taking up your whole yard. But the real advantage is shelf life. Left in their shells, hazelnuts can sit in storage for over a year with no refrigeration needed at all. That's exactly why they carried European households through grain shortages for centuries, tucked away in cellars in burlap sacks, rationed out slowly through the cold months. If you're feeling like food security is too big a problem to tackle, start small. Plant 2 different hazelnut varieties so they can cross-pollinate, and you've already built yourself a safety net. Are you the type who plans for tomorrow instead of just getting through today? If that's you, drop "ready" in the comments. Let's build this together. 3. Fig, the tree that refuses to quit. Ancient civilizations put figs in their scripture and their art for a reason. This tree is absurdly productive and nearly impossible to kill. A mature fig tree can produce 100 to 200 pounds of fruit a year, thriving in rocky, dry soil that would finish off almost anything else. Every neighborhood has that one older relative who always had a bowl of fruit on the table no matter how bad the drought got, and more often than not, there was a scraggly, overlooked fig tree in the corner of their yard doing all the work. That's the thing about figs. They don't ask for attention, and they punish you for giving them too much of it. Overwater a fig, and you'll get lush leaves and almost no fruit. Ignore it, and it rewards you. Dried figs pack about 1,200 calories per pound, which made them the original energy bar for anyone stretching a winter pantry. Soldiers, traders, and mountain travelers carried them for exactly that reason long before anyone had heard of a granola bar. And figs are fast. Many varieties fruit in just 2 to 3 years, so if you feel behind on building your own food supply, this is how you catch up quickly. You can even start one from a simple cutting. No nursery trip required. Just snip a branch from a healthy tree, root it in water or soil, and within a couple of seasons, you've got a second producing tree for free. 4. Apple, the tree that got families through the cold. Apples don't get the exotic reputation of tropical fruit, but no tree in history has fed more people through brutal winters. A mature apple tree can produce 200 to 400 pounds of fruit a year, and its real power is versatility in storage. Kept cool and dark, certain varieties last 3 to 6 months fresh. Dried, they last over a year. Turned into cider, they'll keep almost indefinitely. That's 3 completely different storage paths from one harvest. Fresh eating in the fall, dried snacks through the winter, and preserved cider or vinegar that can sit on a shelf for years. Yes, apples ask for patience, 6 to 10 years before full production, and most varieties need a second tree nearby for pollination. But the payoff is enormous. Just 4 mature apple trees can hand your family nearly 800 pounds of food a year, and that system will keep running for 50 to 80 years with barely any upkeep. If you want to build a food legacy instead of staying dependent on a fragile supply chain, subscribe now. I'm walking through exactly how to set this up in your own yard. 5. Persimmon, nature's candy when everything else has stopped. Late autumn strips most trees bare, but the persimmon is just getting started. It hangs onto bright orange fruit well after the first frost, sometimes even after the first snow, delivering a burst of sugar and vitamins right when nothing else is producing. A mature tree can yield 150 to 300 pounds of fruit annually. Dry them, and they develop a natural sugary coating with a chewy, date-like texture that keeps for over a year with no additives needed. Travelers and soldiers once carried dried persimmons as lightweight, high-energy rations precisely because they held up so well on long journeys without spoiling. The tree itself shrugs off most pests and diseases, which means no spraying, no constant babysitting, just a tree doing its job season after season. It takes about 4 to 6 years to start fruiting, but once it does, it's basically a set-and-forget sugar reserve that shows up right on schedule every single year, right when your other trees have already finished for the season. We're halfway through the list, and the next 5 trees aren't just about snacking. They're about fat, protein, timber, and raw survival calories, the kind of resources that can carry a family, or a whole community, through the hardest years. 6. Chestnut, the tree that grows bread. For hundreds of years across Europe and Asia, this was called the bread tree, and it earned that name honestly. Unlike most nuts, which are mostly fat, chestnuts are loaded with complex carbohydrates, closer to a potato than a walnut. A mature tree can produce 200 to 400 pounds of nuts a year. You can roast them, boil them, or grind them into a gluten-free flour that stores for months. In mountain regions where wheat wouldn't grow reliably, chestnut groves were the difference between survival and famine. Entire villages in the Apennines and the Pyrenees built their winter diets around chestnut flour bread, porridge, and even a rough pasta. They take 5 to 7 years to begin producing, but you're planting something that can keep feeding a family for 300 years. Think about that for a second. A tree you plant this year could still be feeding your descendants when the year reads 2326. If this is the kind of long-term thinking you want more of, hit like right now. It helps this reach people who are done relying on the grocery store for everything. 7. Almond, the drought-hardy fat and protein machine. Almonds thrive exactly where most trees struggle: hot, dry, rocky ground that would wither a peach tree in a single summer. A mature almond tree can produce 50 to 100 pounds of nuts annually, And per pound, almonds deliver close to 2,500 calories, along with a serious dose of protein and healthy fat, two things that are brutally hard to replace in any self-sufficient diet. Their natural shell gives them incredible staying power, keeping the nuts edible for well over a year in simple, cool, dry storage. No canning, no freezing, just a dry shelf and time. Almond trees start producing relatively fast, often within 3 to 5 years, and they'll keep bearing for 25 years or more, with minimal care once established. In a system built around long-term food security, a tree that hands you fat, protein, and calories all at once is about as valuable as it gets, especially if your climate leans dry, where fruit trees that need consistent moisture simply won't keep up. 8. Walnut, the tree that pays twice. Walnut trees quietly do two jobs most trees can't. First, food. A mature tree can produce 50 to 80 pounds of nuts a year, translating to somewhere around 150,000 to 240,000 calories from a single tree, loaded with omega-3s and protein that become critical when meat and dairy are hard to come by. The hard shell keeps the nuts fresh for over a year without any refrigeration, which is why walnuts have always shown up in root cellars and pantries as a long-haul protein source. Second, and this is the part most people miss, walnut timber is genuinely valuable, sometimes worth thousands of dollars per mature tree. Furniture makers and instrument builders specifically seek out walnut wood for its color and grain, so a single well-grown tree can eventually be worth more standing as an asset than most people expect from a piece of land that size. Walnuts take patience, 6 to 10 years before they start producing, but they can keep feeding a family for 150 to 200 years, and the timber becomes an inheritance in its own right. Plant one now, and you're building both an annual food supply and a future payout for whoever comes after you. 9. Oak, the forgotten calorie forest. Oak trees are usually written off as shade or lumber, but for thousands of years, they quietly fed entire civilizations. A mature oak can drop anywhere from 200 to 1,000 pounds of acorns in a good year, and while most people assume acorns are inedible, they're actually dense in carbohydrates and healthy fat. The tannins that make them bitter can be leached out with water, a process people have used for thousands of years, turning acorns into a mild, versatile flour for bread or porridge. Native peoples across North America and communities across the Mediterranean and East Asia built entire food systems around this single process: soak, rinse, dry, grind. Oaks shrug off storms, drought, and pests that would flatten a commercial orchard, and once established, they require essentially zero maintenance. You don't fertilize an oak, you don't spray an oak, you plant it, and then mostly you leave it alone for the rest of your life. Yes, it takes 20 to 30 years to reach full production, but an oak can live for 200 to 500 years. Plant one, and you're not just feeding your family, you're planting a food source for a community that hasn't been born yet, a tree your great-great-grandchildren might still be harvesting from. 10. Pecan, the calorie king of the backyard. The pecan tree looks like a shade giant, but it's really a calorie factory in disguise. A mature tree can produce 200 to 400 pounds of nuts a year, dense in healthy fats and protein, more than enough to support a family through a real food shortage. Protected by a thick shell, pecans stay nutrient-dense for up to 2 years without refrigeration, which is exactly why indigenous communities across North America relied on them as a lightweight, high-energy staple for travel and trade, easy to carry, slow to spoil, and packed with energy per ounce. Pecans ask for patience, 7 to 10 years before they fruit, but the reward is a tree that can keep producing for 200 to 300 years, feeding generations you'll never meet. Now, a few practical notes before we wrap up. If you're only working with a small backyard, don't try to plant all 10 at once. Start with a fast producer like mulberry or fig for quick wins in the first few years, then add a mid-range tree like hazelnut or almond, and finally plant one long-term legacy tree like oak, chestnut, or walnut, somewhere it has room to grow for the next century. That combination gives you food in year 3, food in year 5, and food that outlives you. Also pay attention to spacing. Nut trees like walnut, pecan, and oak eventually need 30 to 40 feet of room to spread out, so plant them on the edge of your property, not in the middle of a small yard. Fruit trees like mulberry, fig, and apple can be kept smaller with pruning and planted closer together, even along a fence line. And the one mistake almost everyone makes, planting a single tree of a variety that needs a pollinator. Apples and several other trees on this list need a second, different variety nearby to actually produce fruit. Always check before you buy, or you'll end up waiting years just to find out your one lonely tree was never going to fruit alone. Building a food legacy isn't about instant results. It's a shift in mindset, from someone who buys food to someone who produces it. From the bread-like abundance of the chestnut to the fat and protein of the walnut and the pecan, these trees aren't just calories, they're independence. While the modern food system runs on fragile supply chains and prices that only seem to go up, a backyard planted with even a few of these trees becomes something the grocery store can never offer you. Security that renews itself every single year. You don't need an orchard to start. Even one or two of these trees this season can change what your family's future looks like. You're trading a small patch of land and a little patience now for decades, sometimes centuries, of food security for the people who come after.